Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest. Before we introduce our guest, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact is giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to public education in the form of a free gift. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. Okay, today we have Superintendent Puig from Robstown ISD. Superintendent Puig, thank you for joining us today.
Excited to be here. Good morning.
Good morning. Um, okay, just so our listeners get to know you and your district a little bit, could you share your background and how you got to be where you are today? And then also your district, kind of the location, size, and that sort of thing.
Sure. A little bit about me. Let's see. I have been the chief teacher here on special assignment, also known as the superintendent here in Robstown for a couple of years. Been a superintendent for about 14 years. Also worked in the private sector in the marketing research space for about 10 years. So I kind of blend my perspective from both the private sector and public sector and kind of use that to really guide my leadership. Uh, About our district, let's see. I don't know how you beat this, but we're 25 miles from the beach, 25 miles northwest of
Nice.
Corpus Christi. So, yeah, it's a good spot. Our vision is to ignite brilliance, transform lives, and empower generations. So, yeah, we're having a good time here in Robstown, America.
Very cool. Very cool. And sorry, what was the size one more time? How many students?
2,500 students.
2,500. Got it. Got it. And it's always helpful because, around Texas, we have so many different size districts and they all operate a little bit differently depending on the size.
Sure.
And so, what are you passionate about in public education? Anything on your radar? We've had people talk about funding and a lot of other areas. Funding is a hot one. I always mention that one because it always comes up. But is there any other? What are you focused on funding, or are you focused on other topics, or what's on your radar
Well,
these
I think
days?
I think we're focused on vision here, and I think that is probably the most important leadership characteristic trait. And I think vision should drive the way you allocate resources and funding. So I think that really becomes the primary vehicle through which business gets done in public education. It is about a visionary approach. You might call it vision-driven leadership, whatever that word you want to use. It is, I think, the deficit that we're dealing with most in public education. The deficit is not funding, the deficit is in vision, in my humble opinion.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, yeah, vision drives everything. What are some of the characteristics of a successful vision? If you were to share with some other superintendents out there when thinking about vision.
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure that people understand it's not something nebulous. It's not something abstract. I think we understand that it's very, very concrete. And I think when we talk about vision, we need to understand that it is something that really defines and explains where your effort goes. I mean, if you go back to your point about funding. I mean, your vision drives the way you allocate resources, right? So your goals and objectives are an allocation really of your vision, your mission, your values. And I think we see that a lot in the private sector, but when you come into public education, we give a little bit of emphasis on it, attention, if you will, just a little bit, but probably not enough. And when you don't give enough, what you see is over time what we're seeing, I think, in the legislative session now, and that is, this emergence of vouchers and this lack of wanting to spend as much money in education as we need to. All of that is a direct result of a lack of vision. And public ed has pretty much moved at a glacial pace over the last 100 years, and it probably looks the same as it did. I'm much older than you, Gary, so it probably looks the same as it did when you were in school as when I was in school, and that's concerning. That's concerning. And well, how do you make change? How do you do that? I think you need to agitate the future, and that means rallying people around a vision. So that's a little bit about what it looks like.
Love it. No, awesome, awesome. Yeah, and I mean, with our listeners, we get about 1,000 listeners a month, right? So we get superintendents from all over the
Awesome.
state, and yeah, and everybody does have a unique vision, and as you mentioned, it kind of ties to the operations, right? The operations of things and the activities that lead up to that vision or goal or milestone, and of course those are the things that build up to the vision, right? Um, so what's on the horizon at your district? What do you speaking, in terms of vision, for your district, anything exciting happen in the future that aligns
Oh, there's
with y'all's
tremendous
vision?
things exciting, and we'll talk about what vision-driven execution looks like too. You can't have vision without execution, right? So I do want to talk about that, but I'm curious from your perspective in the private sector. You've got a podcast, right? I mean, you have a vision for your podcast. I mean, what does that sound like? How do
Yep.
you espouse the vision? What is that in a nutshell for you?
Yeah, the vision for the podcast is just spreading the good word around public education, and it enables our listeners to hear directly from superintendents on what's going on, because there's a lot of murkiness out there on exactly what's happening in public education. But yeah, so it's a nice vehicle to get the truth out.
I love that. Sounds like a good mission, and I think what you said at the top of the conversation is help spread the good word, right? And the good word is about leadership and, in my humble opinion, visionary leadership. So what does that look like in Robstown to your question? Well, historically, if you look at performance in Robstown, it's ISD, it's really been pretty flat, and it hasn't been the highest performing district uh, in quite some time. Years ago, we had, Blue Ribbon School, we had exemplary schools and all that sort of thing, but the district has lost its way. And how does it lose its way? Again, when a district loses its vision, its direction, then you can't escape the consequences of that, right? So here we are with a new board, a new superintendent, trying to reignite and give clarity and coherence to our direction. And what does that look like? So we just had some kiddos, grades 1 through 5, come back from Orlando, Florida, this past weekend. What were they doing in Orlando, Florida? Well, they were competing in their first science bee, not spelling bee, but science bee. So
Huh.
these kids locally, they've never done it. We have a very passionate teacher that came and said, "Hey, we really want to stretch these kids. Our vision is to ignite brilliance. What does that look like?" Well, it means challenging and stretching your kids to go beyond taking a test, right? So these kids took a qualifying exam here locally, did really, really well, really excited. So they got to go compete regionally in San Antonio last month. And you've got hundreds of schools from across the state nerding out in science. You're talking kids from kindergarten through 5th grade. And these kids did tremendous. They've never done this before here in Robstown. I think we had probably 25 qualify for nationals. And so that's an out-of-state trip. We're all excited. So we go to the school board and say, "Hey, our vision is to ignite brilliance and transform lives and empower generations. School board, will you approve this trip to Florida, this out-of-state trip for these kiddos to live our vision?" And sure enough, the board approves it. So our kids, I think we probably had half of those kids that were able to go. A lot of them had Memorial Weekend plans, but we had the most representation of any school district nationally there in Orlando. And again, the kids didn't come back with a bunch of trophies and ribbons. This is their first time, but what they did come back with is an experience. And they came back having been challenged and stretched and seen the world a little bit outside of Robstown. And for our kids who are 90% economically disadvantaged, that was quite an experience. It is a life-changing experience. And so a vision has to create opportunities for kids to have these life-changing experiences. And it might look different than Carroll ISD or Fort Worth ISD or even Corpus ISD. But I think the job of leadership is to really crystallize that vision and act it in a way where everyone is pooling together, almost like a human tower you would see in Catalonia. And that sort of focus, if you will, that belief, that alignment really closes the what I call the vision gap, the gap between where you are, where you've been, and what's actually possible. And that is exciting. So that's one example in Robstown of sort of living the vision and showing what it looks like. If that makes sense, Gary.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I like that approach. I really do, because a lot of times when people think about, visions or missions, and I know people have different definitions depending on what it is and or how they define it. But at the end of the day, there's certain things you have to do to accomplish that mission or vision. And it seems like you're changing the hearts of people, which, makes it a lot easier to pursue and pursue that vision in the first place.
Yeah.
with the experiences that you're creating for the students.
Yeah, it's a lot of work because there are, I would say, you might want to call them anti-vision behaviors. And these are distractions that we create in public education. Some of it's the ledge, some of it is uh, you know, culture, habits, traditions in certain districts, the way you've done business, and you and I both know that, the status quo holds on with bloody tenacity. And so, the only way to really penetrate that is to get people to rally around a vision. I think that's the most challenging thing for leadership.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Uh, I imagine it's hard to to have change in the first place, or people take actions towards change if there's not a vision that they're aligned with. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it'll carry on, business as usual as long as you let it. And, kids are going to go to the bus stop in the morning. The bus is going to pick them up. We'll take them to school. They'll have breakfast. They'll go through classes, and at the end of the day, they'll go back to the bus stop, get picked up, and go home, and hopefully safe and sound. But that experience from pick up to drop off has to be life changing. And I don't know that enough of that message about vision is out there. We get, again, like I said, distracted with a lot of things that I think people, well-intentioned, we all are well-intentioned. This work is hard, but not to be biblical here, but you go to Proverbs, very a lot of wisdom in Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I just, again, you asked me at the top of our conversation what I'm passionate about. That's everything right now. I think if we can get people to rally around a vision, we'll change some lives. We'll continue to change some lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It sounds like you're laying a great foundation there to build off of, with that vision. So that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that. And so who's been inspiring to you in your career? Anybody you can think of that really stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. I have a great mentor and colleague that uh, really helped grow me as a young administrator. My first career, that was Robin Ryan. He retired as a superintendent in Grapevine, Colleyville. He hired me in Dallas ISD as a young superintendent, or sorry, as a young principal, and I really learned so much from his steadfast leadership and visionary approach. Very practical. Was a military guy, very strategic, but just an incredible impact on the way I serve today in public education. Massive, massive impact. I would say he's one that stands out, and certainly I think in the private sector, when I was in the marketing space, I had a very visionary CEO. It hired me as a young analyst that didn't know anything, and stretched me to learn a lot of things that I apply today in my education space. And it was Roger Gates. He's retired. He's since sold his company. He's probably in his 80s now, but he probably doesn't realize the impact he had on me today. But just appreciate his visionary leadership in growing a company. He was a professor at UT Arlington, and he started a marketing firm, and he grew it from a couple of $1,000s a year to a multi-million-dollar company in 20 years. And just a great vision, great vision. Oh my gosh. So yeah, those two stand out for sure.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I always have to ask because all of our superintendents that we have on the podcast, they have unique backgrounds that have brought them to the success they've had, and also perspectives on things. So it's always great to hear,
Oh yeah.
what kind of influences you've had. And there's some amazing mentors out there. I think everybody listening in can think about somebody in their life that had a transformational experience in their life, which it sounds like you're creating for your students and your staff as well.
We're doing
Um,
the best we can. That's for sure. Yes, Gary.
aw-
Absolutely.
awesome, love it. Okay, well, I know we're running short on time. Any last thoughts before we close out the podcast?
No, I just again appreciate the platform to allow superintendents around the state to come on and talk about the great things that are happening in public education. I mean, here in public ed, we've got an immense challenge, but uh, from every point in Texas, great things are happening. And the thing is, every district has a unique population, that requires a unique vision. But at the end, all of the kids belong to all of us, and they're going to take care of us, and we're old someday, Gary. And I'm just excited to know that you're trying to, use your platform to spread the good word in public education, because God knows we need it right now. So I certainly appreciate you, Gary.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. And your last words of wisdom there made me think about one of our first podcast. It might have been the very first podcast episode where it said, leave the world better than how you found it. Right. And it sounds
That's
like
it.
yep. Well, great.
That's
All
it.
right. Well, thank you again. And thank you to our
Got it.
listeners that have been tuning in. And before we close out, we do want to give one final shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to public education in the form of a free gift. I think they've exceeded over $1 billion. Don't quote me on that, but they have given lots of money away to public education. I want to say the last figures I heard were over $1 billion. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes of the Educational Leadership Podcast.